The way is the beginning of all things and the measure of right and wrong. Therefore, the enlightened ruler holds fast to the beginning in order to understand the wellspring of all beings, and minds the measure in order to know the source of good and bad. He waits, empty and still, letting names define themselves and affairs reach their own settlement. Being empty, he can comprehend the true aspect of fullness. Being still, he can correct the mover. Those whose duty it is to speak will come forward to name themselves. Those whose duty it is to act will produce results. When names and results match, the ruler need do nothing more, and the true aspect of all things is revealed. Hence it is said, the ruler must not reveal his desires, for if he reveals his desires, his ministers will put on the mask that pleases him. He must not reveal his will, for if he does so, his ministers will show a different face. So it is said, discard likes and dislikes, and the ministers will show their true form. Discard wisdom and wile, and the ministers will watch their step. Hence, though the ruler is wise, he hatches no schemes from his wisdom, but causes all men to know their place. Though he has worth, he does not display it in his deeds, but observes the motives of his ministers. Though he is brave, he does not flaunt his bravery in shows of indignation, but allows his subordinates to display their valour to the full. And we go on, another key passage. The way lies in what cannot be seen, its function in what cannot be known. Be empty, still, and idle, and from your place of darkness observe the defects of others. See, but do not appear to see. Listen, but do not appear to listen. Know, but do not let it be known that you know. When you perceive the trend of a man's words, do not change them, do not correct them, but examine them and compare them with the results. Assign one man to each office, and do not let men talk to each other, and then all will do their utmost. Hide your tracks, conceal your sources, so that your subordinates cannot trace the springs of your action. Discard wisdom, forswear ability, so that your subordinates cannot guess what you are about. Stick to your objectives and examine the results to see how they match. Take hold of the handles of government carefully and grip them tightly. Destroy all hope, to smash all intention of wresting them from you. Allow no men to covet them. If you do not guard the door, if you do not make fast the gate, then tigers will lurk there. And again, the ruler of men stands in danger of being blocked in 5 ways. When the ministers shut out their ruler, this is one kind of block. When they get control of the wealth and resources of the state, this is a second kind of block. When they are free to issue orders as they please, this is a third kind. When they are able to do righteous deeds in their own name, this is a fourth kind. When they are able to build up their own cliques, this is a fifth kind. And so on and so forth. Now, harsh, as legalist rule is said to have been, listen to the following. The enlightened ruler in bestowing rewards is as benign as the seasonable rain. The dew of his bounty profits all people. But in doling out punishment, he is terrible as the thunder. Even the holy sages cannot assuage him. The enlightened ruler is never over-liberal in his rewards, never over-lenient in his punishments. If his rewards were too liberal, then ministers who have won merit in the past would grow lax in their duties. And if his punishments are too lenient, then evil ministers will find it easy to do wrong. Mention was made of the 2 levers of power. These are the famous 2 handles of Feizi's theory, those of punishment and reward. carrots and sticks, if you like. From another chapter, we have the following. The enlightened ruler controls his ministers by means of two handles alone. The two handles are punishment and reward. What do I mean by punishment and reward? To inflict mutilation and death on men is called punishment. To bestow honour and reward is called favour. Those who act as ministers fear the penalties and hope to profit by the rewards. Hence, if the ruler wields his own punishments and favours, the ministers will fear his sternness and flock to receive his benefits. We'll pass now to some interesting observations, by the way, there on the question of transparency. Are there not? There is more. We pass now to the way of the minister. Han Fei's advice in these chapters devoted to persuasion is directly related to his experience as a minister in the state of Han. He was a minister in the Han state for many years, mainly unsuccessfully. Here he is at most incisive in observing the distortions in knowledge and information flows that result from proximity to power. This is from the chapter, The Difficulties of Persuasion. On the whole, the difficult thing about persuading others is not that one lacks the knowledge needed to state his case, nor the audacity to exercise his abilities to the full. On the whole, the difficult thing about persuasion is to know the mind of the person one is trying to persuade and to be able to fit your words to it. If the person you are trying to persuade is out to establish a reputation for high-mindedness, and you talk to him about making a fat profit, then he will regard you as a low-bred person and accord you a shabby and contemptuous reception, and undoubtedly send you packing. On the other hand, if the person you are trying to persuade is interested in money, and you talk to him about high ideals, he will regard you as a fool and as out of touch with reality and will never heed your arguments. But if the person you are trying to persuade is secretly out for the money, but ostensibly claims to be interested in reputation and high ideals, and you talk to him about a reputation for virtue, then he will pretend to welcome and heed you, but in fact will shunt you aside. If you talk to him about making big profits, he will secretly follow your advice, but ostensibly reject you. These are matters that you must not fail to consider very carefully. And it goes on. Transparency goes down in flames. I quote, "Undertakings succeed through secrecy, but fail through being found out. Though the ruler himself has not yet divulged his plans, if you in your discussions happen to hit upon his hidden motives, then you will be in danger. If the ruler is ostensibly seeking one thing, but actually is attempting to accomplish something quite different, and you perceive not only his ostensible objective, but the real motives behind his actions as well, then you will likewise be in danger. If you happen to think up some unusual scheme for the ruler which meets his approval, and some other person of intelligence manages by some means to guess what it is and divulges the secret to the world, then the ruler will guess that it was you who gave it away, and you will be in danger." And so on. The art of the advisor or the minister is not an easy one. If you talk, here again, another quote, "If you talk to the ruler about men of real worth, he will think you are implying that he is no match for them. If you talk to him of petty people, he will think you are attempting to use your influence to get your friends into office. If you talk to him about what he likes, he will suspect you of trying to utilize him. If you talk about what he hates, he will suspect you of trying to test his patience." And then the important thing in persuasion is to learn how to play up the aspects of the person you are talking about is proud of, and play down the aspects he is ashamed of. Thus, if the person has some urgent personal desire, you should show him that it is public duty to carry it out and urge him not to delay, and so on and so forth. Praise other men whose deeds are like those of the person you are talking to. Commend other actions which are based upon the same policies as his. If there is someone else who is guilty of the same vice he is, be sure to gloss it over by showing that it really does no great harm. If there is someone else who has suffered the same failure he has, be sure to defend it by demonstrating that it was not a loss after all. And so on and so forth. This is indeed timeless wisdom. Now, it is actually possible to be successful in this role. And Han Fei does actually describe this situation as well. So let us not think that it is ringed around by problems and that nothing is ever solved in political life. And I quote again, "If you are able to fulfill long years of service with the ruler, enjoy his fullest favour and confidence, lay long-range plans for him without ever arousing suspicion, and when necessary oppose him in argument without incurring blame, then you may achieve merit by making it clear to him what is profitable and what is harmful, and bring glory to yourself by your forthright judgments of right and wrong. When ruler and minister aid and sustain each other in this way, persuasion may be said to have reached its fulfillment." We'll go on to the law. In Han Fei's system of governance, laws are meant to be clearly and consistently applied. Even the ruler, and this is again very much contrary to what our undergraduate textbook tells us, even the ruler must abide by the law and implement the law and its rewards and punishments impartially. Far from being an instrument of the ruler's personal whim, it is the law which is used to keep the powerful in check and the state well governed. I just have one very brief quotation about that, but you'll get the idea. If the rulers cannot make the law clear and use it to restrain the authority of the high ministers, then they will have no means to win the confidence of the people at large. If the ruler of men discards the law and instead attempts to use some of his ministers to control others, then those who love each other will band together in groups for mutual praise, and those who hate each other will form cliques for mutual slander, with praise and slander striving to shout each other down. The ruler will become bewildered and confused. So it is law which actually prevents that kind of disorder from breaking out within the structure of the governing body. And finally, we will get to the offending chapter, the five vermin, one of those which Guomoro pointed out as being most fascistic in its theoretical nature. This famous chapter is aimed at various kinds of people who abandoned primary pursuits, and we begin to understand something of Guomoro's concern here, because Han Feizi did not actually have very much time for Confucian scholars. The verminous groups of people parasitic on the state included scholars, rhetoricians, in other words, consultants, professional soldiers, avoiders of military service, and merchants, and craftsmen who made luxury goods. All of these groups, according to Han Fei, were parasitic on the state and the public purse. One can but disapprove. The beginning of the chapter actually begins with a famous passage, arguing that the fabled ideal of the sage kings was historically conditioned. The entire discussion is quite Malthusian in general structure and very interesting. And I'd like to read from it. And here we are from the five vermin. In the most ancient times, when men were few and creatures were numerous, human beings could not overcome the birds, beasts, insects, and reptiles. Then a sage appeared who fashioned nests of wood to protect men from harm. The people were delighted and made him ruler of the world, calling him the nest builder. The people lived on fruits, berries, mussels, and clams, things rank and evil-smelling that hurt their bellies, so that many of them fell ill. Then a sage appeared who drilled with sticks and produced fire with which to transform the rank and putrid foods. The men were delighted and made him ruler of the world, calling him the drill man who invented fire. In the age of Middle Antiquity, there was a great flood in the world, but Kun and Yu of the Xia dynasty opened up the channels for water. In the age of recent antiquity, Jie and Zhou ruled in a violent and perverse way, but Tang of the Yin dynasty and Wu of the Zhou dynasty overthrew them. Now, if anyone had built a wooden nest or drilled for fire in the time of the Xia dynasty, Kun and Yu would have laughed at them. And if anyone had tried to open channels for water during the Yin and Zhou dynasties, Tang and Wu would have laughed at them. This being so, if people in the present age go about exalting the ways of the sage kings Yao, Shun, Yu, Tang, and Wu, the sages of today are bound to laugh at them. For the sage does not try to practice the ways of antiquity to abide by a fixed standard, but examines the affairs of the age and takes what precautions are necessary. In ancient times, husbands did not have to till the fields, for the seeds of grass and the fruit of trees were enough for people to eat. Wives did not have to weave, for the skins of animals and birds provided sufficient clothing. No one had to struggle to keep himself supplied. The people were few, there was an abundance of goods, and so no one quarrelled. Therefore, no rich rewards were doled out, no harsh punishments were administered, and yet the people of themselves were orderly. But nowadays, no one regards 5 sons as a large number, and these 5 sons in turn have 5 sons each, so that before the grandfather has died, he has 25 grandchildren. Hence, the number of people increases, goods grow scarce, and men have to struggle and slave for a meagre living. Therefore, they fall to quarrelling, and though rewards are doubled and punishments are piled on, they cannot be prevented from growing disorderly. And so on and so forth. And note in particular the following. Hence, when men of ancient times made light of material goods, it was not because they were benevolent, but because there was a surplus of goods. And when men quarrel and snatch today, it is not because they are vicious. It is because goods have grown scarce. When men lightly relinquish the position of the Son of Heaven, as the sage kings did, it is not because they are high-minded, but because the advantages of the post are slight. When men strive for sinecures in the government today, it is not because they are base, but because the power they will acquire is great. When the sage rules, he takes into consideration the quantity of things and deliberates on scarcity and plenty. Circumstances change according to the age, and ways of dealing with them change with the circumstances. Now, it's interesting here to note that Han Fei's argument is that people in his contemporary world were not greedy or grasping because of any moral failing, but simply because population growth meant that demand had outstripped supply. On this point at least, I would say that Han Fei adopts an attitude which is more progressive and more humane than that of the Confucians. I'll close in having some comments on Machiavelli and the comparison, which is very well worth making. The work of Han Fei does in fact bear comparison with that of Niccolò Machiavelli, and especially his famous treatise, Il Principe, the Prince. One might think that the difference in milieu would make these treatises radically different, not just in style, but in substance. But the commonalities overall are striking, if not uncanny. Machiavelli lived from 1469 to 1527, and his treatise was based on his own experience of office under the Florentine Republic. So he too served as a civil servant in an organized state. Renaissance Italy was divided into a congeries of small states at the time, most of them led by a hereditary royal family, but there were some republics as well, in fierce competition with each other militarily and economically. It was a situation of disunity and competition at a time when education, technology, and wealth were all expanding. At the time, Machiavelli's famous treatise on statecraft so shocked the men of goodwill that Machiavelli was identified with Satan himself. In fact, he was not actually an advocate of unethical behaviour, but merely a realist concerned with government that would last and would deliver a well-ordered state. To quote my colleague Giolo Bianco, Machiavelli can only be understood as removing ethical considerations from discussions of politics, where they had previously been intertwined, and thereby inventing a science of the study of power. And like Han Fei, Machiavelli was concerned to analyse how knowledge and power are interrelated, and was disposed to say that power organises what we take knowledge to be. So here we have two great thinkers separated by 1700 years, one at the eastern end of the Eurasian continent and the other at the western end, each living at the beginning of a new era in his respective civilization. Han Fei at the dawn of 2,000 years of Chinese imperial rule, and Machiavelli at the dawn of the modern age in Europe. Both of them remain highly relevant for us at this present juncture in the history of human beings on this planet. Thank you.